a face like, is this person crazy? They make a face like, maybe that's possible. These are not accidental cues. People who are seasoned in negotiation know how to use physical cues to give the proper feedback. Now, not to say people will abuse those physical cues and try and make it seem like something is bothering you than not, but this is something that you will go over once you reach an advanced negotiation piece. Finally, be aware of drawbacks. No agreement, relationship damage, poor implementation. So what I mean with this is, and this goes back to the bulldoze part. If you are overly aggressive in a negotiation, and then you end up signing a 5-year contract with this company or with this person, you don't have to deal with them with 5 years. You've essentially could have treated them like complete crap, and now you're stuck with them for 5 years. So that's what you always have to be aware of the relationship. And that was why when I gave the earlier definition of a business negotiation, relationship is always key. As soon as it's different than an individual negotiation, and I think I'll cover that in the next slide, but the relationship is key. You want to leave it in a positive relationship. Also, there's a possibility of poor implementation. So if you're ever negotiating with, let's say, an IT firm who's maybe implementing a new software or a new process into your business, if you treat them poorly in the negotiation, well, guess what? They're not going to send you the A team or maybe even the B team. You might get the C or the D team. And the implementation may not go well for you or positively for you because you were so, aggressive, or you were, very distrustful during the negotiation. So these are some of the things that you have to keep in mind when negotiating. Okay. This is a cool infographic I found, and I think it really shows the importance of having a different approach or selecting the right approach when doing a relationship. So what we see here is importance of the relationship on the x-axis from low to high, and importance of the outcome from low to high. So in the top left quadrant, we have take the pie. This is where you don't care about the relationship at all, and what I kind of inferred earlier on, where I said, buying a new car, negotiating your house insurance. This is a one-time deal where you don't care about the relationship. In this scenario, you can be aggressive. You can be, very forward to get what you want, because after this, you never have to deal with the person again. Whether you use your insurance or whether you have to do the car, you're never dealing with the salesman again. You'll be dealing with other parts of the business. So you really don't care about that relationship. Then you have the bottom left-hand one, which is called splitting the pie. This is where the importance of the outcome is low and the relationship is low as well. So you don't want to spend too much effort. You just want to essentially ensure that what you're doing is essentially evenly divided, or essentially that you get a good amount of value. You may need to buy from them again. You may need to do something there, but essentially, you just try to get there, get out of the negotiation with what you'd like. Now, in the bottom right, you have serve the pie. So this is something where the relationship is very important, but the outcome is not so important. This is something where you may want to build a relationship for further benefits down the road. So this may be something where you negotiate something to give the individual or the company something they want, and then later down the line, you will get what you want in a future negotiation or in a future aspect. So this is called serving the pie. I wouldn't suggest giving them everything, but you would be much more friendly and much more concession-based, giving them, be a bit more fluid in giving them what they want, because the relationship is really more important than the outcome of the situation. Now, in the top right-hand corner, which I spoke about in the last one, expanding the pie, this is typically what you see in most negotiations. This is where the outcome is important to you and the relationship is important to you. The outcome is important because you want to get the product you want for the best price, the best value for the organization. However, you do also need to work with this organization moving forward. So you also have to do a relationship. As a result, that's also the most complex type of negotiation. Now, I wanted to go into just giving you some examples here. So I always say there's no such thing as a small negotiation, and this is what I mean about growing the pie and getting more value. So here's a couple of examples of how to do negotiation. One is an organization buying a product. The other is when you get a new job and you're negotiating the various parts. So starting on the left, when you buy something, and in this case, this is actually based on an actual negotiation I did for a previous company I worked for. The lab wanted to buy some new glass products. They weren't happy with the current vendor. So typically when you buy something, well, what do you think you have to do? Oh, well, this is the type of glass I like, and I'm just going to buy it. Well, no, there's a lot more to it. And essentially the terms or the interest involved could be based on the size of the contract. So if it's a small contract, maybe tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands per year, then maybe you're not going to spend too much time, diving too deep into this. But in this case, this contract was worth, almost $1 million a year. And as a result, we needed to look at it much more closely. So what are things that we negotiated as part of this contract? And this is actually not an exhaustive list. There's actually a lot more, but I didn't want it to get too lengthy here. Product type, what kind of glass are we buying? Beakers, flasks, so on and so forth for the lab. What's their specification? This is the glass quality. Is it clear glass? Is it tinted glass? Is it shatter resistant? Things like that. Price and volumes. How much are we going to pay for this, and how much do we need to buy? Because, for example, if you want to buy 1 unit a month, that's a low volume purchase, and they're not likely to give you much below market value. However, if you commit to larger volumes, they'll give you price. Also, bulk discounts. If I buy a large amount at any given time, can I get an additional discount? Defective products. How do we deal with defective products when we get them? Do we return them to you? Do you replace them? Do we need to send you pictures? How do you want to do with this? Payment terms we talked about. When do we need to pay for the product? Is it immediately, 15, 30, 60, 90 days after receipt? How are credits and refunds handled? So do we get the money back, or do you just hold it as a credit on your system? Contract length. Do we want the contract for how long? 1 year, 2 year, 5 year? You usually, when you do a contract, you don't want to do it more than 3 to 5 years, simply because the economy and the industry can change so much that the terms could be completely out of date. Annual increases. Most contracts will involve the price going up every year. What is an acceptable amount? 2%, 3%, 5%? Additional fees, freight fees, handling fees, fuel fees. These are additional fees that are typically added that people like to hide in contracts. So you think you're getting a good price, and then meanwhile you get slammed with these additional fees on your first order. Non-competes. If you, when you deal with a large business, often enough they will want you to essentially not deal with their competitors. They may tell you, if you buy from us, you don't buy from any of our competitors, which puts you at a lower position. Supply disruptions in inventory. What happens in a supply disruption? How much of my inventory will you keep on hand? We're a global economy, and often things come from overseas. So, in a contract, sometimes you'll negotiate, well, I want you to keep 1 year's worth of product domestically at any given time. So if there's a supply disruption, I know I'll get product for at least a year. These kinds of negotiations. Communication of changes. Often enough, someone will say, changes will be effective immediately. You'll have to negotiate. No, I want 30, 60, 90 days notice of any changes. Termination of contract. What are the terms of termination? Can they be terminated at any time? If the contract is broken, are you liable for any back payments? As well as liability and delivery. So liability is a legal piece, and then delivery, how often does it get delivered? Daily, weekly, monthly? All these things are areas that could be negotiated, and furthermore, when it comes to the legal piece, there's probably another 24 terms that the lawyers will negotiate between the two organizations. So you can see, even buying something as simple as some glass can become very complicated. Now, similar for all of you, a new job negotiation. When you typically go for a new job, what gets typically negotiated? Well, how much will I get paid, and when do I start? And that's what most businesses want you to negotiate, the bare minimum. But as a new employee, you have the right to bring in more things to create more value for yourself. So what else can you negotiate beyond that? Well, your bonus. How much will I get for a bonus, and how often will it get paid? Some bonuses are annual, some are semi-annual, some are quarterly. Do you get a commission for your job? So essentially, the more you work, the more you make. When's the start date? Contract length. Is this a contract, or is it a full-time position? benefit types. Sometimes organizations will give you the opportunity for, base benefits, or there may be higher benefits, like bronze, silver, and gold type benefits. Do they offer retirement savings? If not, will they? Vacation and stat holidays, how are those paid? How often can I take them? Some organizations will say there's blackout days. You cannot take vacation during these days or these weeks, and these are things that may need to be negotiated. Job title is an important one. One thing you want to make sure when you get a job is that your job title is transferable. Businesses are really good at having their own internal job title that, anyone outside the organization has no clue what you do. So you may want to negotiate for a standardized job title. Signing bonus, how much do I get for starting the job? Working hours, where we're now kind of with the pandemic, this really has come into light. When are the working hours? Are they 9 to 5, or are they, and any time? Do I just need to work 8 hours a day? They've kind of expanded. Working from home, do you have the option to work from home? Maybe you want to work from home once a week or on Fridays or something like that. These are all things that could be negotiated. Relocation expenses. If you got a job in another city or country, will you help me relocate? Professional development. In every job, you should be growing your knowledge base and your experiences. You do this through professional development. So you negotiate a certain amount of monies that is dedicated to you for development. And in some roles as well, there's childcare and expense reimbursement. So if you go see a customer and take them out to the local Starbucks for breakfast, well, do I got to pay out of my pocket, or is the company going to reimburse me? These are things that you cannot just assume will happen, and will need to be negotiated as part of the job. Now, depending on your job as well, all of these may not apply, but this is just a good little tip for things that are commonly negotiated. Okay, I got to speed this up a little bit. I always talk too much. Now, one thing I just wanted to share with you before wrapping up is essentially a framework for negotiations. And just so you're all aware, this is actually copyrighted from a professor I worked with, Professor Weiss of the Schulich School of Business at York University. So if anyone is to duplicate this framework, please ensure that you reference the professor's name in it. So this is a framework he created. It's called the Cirrus Framework. And it's a very good framework for approaching a negotiation. Now, the one thing I cannot emphasize enough is when you go to a negotiation, whether it's a small individual negotiation for a job or something like that, or whether it's a large company-wide multiple person negotiation, practice, research, and planning is key. This is so important. You will not be able to get what you want unless you do this. And to give you an example, I was part of a 6-person negotiation team for a very large contract we had in my previous job. And I think we started planning and practicing probably close to 6 months before the actual negotiation happened. And what we found is that wasn't even enough time. We probably could have done with another month. So these when you go through these things, it's not something that can be done in a day or a week. Depending on the size of the negotiation, you really need to plan. Okay. So the first thing is sketch the situation. This is essentially the planning piece. The planning piece. You need to find who is involved in the negotiation. Know the person. Who are they? What do we expect to negotiate and when? So set up what's going to negotiate. Is it a contract? Is it a deal? Is it about purchasing product A? Is it about something wider? And when is this negotiation? Typically, negotiations will happen a couple months before the expiry of a previous contract, but they can essentially start at any time. How important is this to us and them? Who is really gaining from this negotiation? Am I the person with the upper hand because they need me more than I need them, or is it the reverse? It's very important to be aware of all these things ahead of the negotiation. And what is the nature of our relationship and conditions? Do we have a great relationship with them, and we expect this to be a very smooth, flowing negotiation, or have we had a rocky relationship over the years, and has this been extremely rocky? There were times where I was in a negotiation with one of our partners. And essentially during the negotiation, they were extremely cold. They were extremely aggressive. And then as soon as the negotiation was over, they were all happy and peachy. and they expected us to be friends again. It's like, well, no, that's not the way life works. So you need to always be aware of that, the nature of the relationship, and always nurture it. Once you're aware of the situation, you need to identify issues and interests. So identify topics that are going to be discussed or negotiated. And this is where the value creation comes in. You need to identify what you is interested in you and what the other party is interested in. And this is where communication is key. So you can always call them and say, well, what do you want to negotiate? Are we only negotiating this, or do you want more? How much more do you want? See what it is. There may be some overlap there, and there may be some things that are not on the table, but it's always good to identify those things ahead of time. During this preparation time, there'll be a lot of cross communication between you and the negotiating party. Again, identify the interest in your counterpart's interests. Find connections between the interests. Are they common, complementary, or conflicting? If I want something, is it a common thing? Is there a common goal? Are we both looking to connect here, or is it complementary? I need to connect here in order for them to connect there. Finally, you have the conflicting piece where I talked about earlier, the non-competes. Will I be able to, if I sign a contract with you, then you can't purchase from any of our competitors. That would be like a conflicting interest, right? And then find linkages between topics and interests. So where is one interest possibly linked to another one? Where can we drag them in and make them a common interest? So this is some places where you can really build out what it looks for. Then you get to research. This is kind of tied in with the interests and the issues. You have to research your counterpart, know who they are, what are their perspectives, their interests, resources, capabilities, past behaviors, past negotiation strategies. What are they? If they're a very green company, possibly providing them something green from your end would be a plus. Maybe they have some resources that you don't, or you have some resources that they don't, that you could offer up to help them out. This is, again, growing the value, growing the pie. Understand the history of the relationship. Has it always been positive? Has there been rocky points, and why? Find key individuals. If you have friends, colleagues, old school alumni, clubs, find people who are part of that company or part of the negotiation team who could give you some insider information as to what they're trying to achieve or what they're trying to do. As I said before, the negotiations are very psychological. You need to spend time understanding where their mindset is at, and also identify BATNAs. If we can't come to an agreement, what are our other options? What are other acceptable options that we could do, right? Okay. Oop, what happened here? Sorry. I'm just gonna. Oh, okay. I don't know why that happened. I'm just going to go back to, okay. The next step is representation. This is essentially building your what's called negotiation playbook. Every negotiation you go into, you need to have a playbook which essentially shows you how am I going to enter the situation, what's my strategy, and if I get a specific response or feedback from the other party, how am I going to react? When you're in a negotiation, tensions are high, emotions are high. It's going to be challenging to think on your feet, so which is why you need to have your playbook put together and know how you're going to do this. So in this representation playbook, you will create your general negotiation strategy, you'll draft your alternate proposals, and you'll select your negotiation team. This is very important. Typically when you negotiate, you may have close to half a dozen people there, but there's only one or two people who are actually active in the negotiation, talking back and forth. You may have a note taker just to make sure that everything's documented. You may have someone who looks for physical cues or feedback and takes notes. Oh, when you said this person had a confused look on their face, and so on and so forth. Again, very psychological. You need to understand what you're doing there and how the team's going to be. Another thing, identify persuasion, key points, reasons, and arguments. If you find that, as I said before, the other party is going green, your counterparty, or if there's anything else that you could use as a persuasion to get them to give you something, use it. You would have to document all these things down and know what can be tried. Envision the interaction. This is the practice piece. So you need to practice. You have your team. You'll select a counter team from your organization, and you will role play the negotiation over and over and over again. Try different ways, how people could react, things like that. You create things such as opening statements, comments. You'll propose an agenda and a negotiation structure, things like location, timing, breaks, which are very important. You'll also set a pre-negotiation with the counterparts. This is having communication. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? Are there any small topics we can kind of find common ground on now? This really puts the negotiation into a positive light. And then again, I said practice, practice, practice. Finally, the arrangement of the site. This one is very interesting because people use this almost as psychological warfare, selecting dates and times. A colleague of mine once went to Japan to negotiate a deal, and essentially what they did is he went to arrive a day earlier, and the second he got off the plane, they told him that the negotiation has changed and it's happening in an hour. So he had no time to prepare. He had no time to adjust. He was jet lagged, and that put him in a lower position in the negotiation. And people know that, and people will push that. Excuse me. Communication channels and locations. How will we communicate? Will we both be in the same room face to face? Will we be in separate rooms? Who will be the communicative party bringing people back and forth to discuss? Will these people have side chats, or how will things go? Which personal equipment will you have there? Laptops, cell phones, digital translators, etc. And if this is a face-to-face negotiation, how will we prep the room? How will the seating be? Will it be face-to-face? Will it be side-to-side, confrontational? What will be the layout? Which equipment will be present? Which resources and amenities will we use? There's a negotiation that I covered when I was in business school that was very interesting, where the party who set up the venue actually set up the tables nearly right in front of each other, and the people were sitting on one side of the table, and the other side of the table they actually put shorter chairs than the other side of the table. So when they were negotiating, the people on the one side who booked it were looking down on the actual people. And this is kind of why I said negotiations can sometimes be psychological warfare. You set things up ahead for success, but again, when you do things like this, you're not always keeping the relationship in check. So you have to just kind of keep that in mind. So this is a really great framework that could be used, whether it's an individual negotiation or whether it's a group negotiation, but these are things that need to be done. The stronger the planning and the stronger the practice of the negotiation, the more likely you are to create more value and to capture more of it during the actual negotiation. Okay. Finally, just the winning conditions. How do we ensure that we have a positive outcome in a negotiation? As I said, ensure plenty of time to research, plan, and practice. You should never try and drag yourself into a negotiation unprepared, that you're just not going to get the best out of it. Second, create a playbook, as we said, of many outcomes, even if you're not going to use them. This is good because once you have a playbook, you have a framework and structure that you could use for subsequent negotiations. As well, if you ever have to renegotiate with this person, you have the essentially how the previous negotiation went, who was there, what went well, what could have done better, so on and so forth. Finally, always respect and appreciate your counterpart. Reputation is key. Regardless of what happens, once the negotiation is over, be polite, be pleasant, never storm out of the room or anything like that, because in many cases, you'll have to work with these people in the future. Okay. Now, I'm a big fan of lifelong learning. Sorry, I'm just checking the time here. Okay. I'm a big fan of lifelong learning, and I want to give you guys some books that I've read that have been very helpful. Probably one of the best books ever written and still, used today is Getting to Yes. If you haven't read this, I suggest everyone get this book and read it in terms of doing your negotiations. It really provides foundational level strategies for being successful. The second one is Negotiating Genius. This is probably a next level after you've gone through some negotiation. It provides more intermediate and advanced strategies for improving your skills. And finally, I know he's not the most loved person, but this book has been around for some time, and it's really interesting. The Art of the Deal, and essentially it shows you how to think to think big and have a large mindset when going into negotiations and having deals. And this is all about kind of the whole value creation piece. So these are books that I would suggest you to read. Finally, in terms of some resources, I've shown this slide before, but it's a great one. Networking is a very great way to not only practice your negotiation skills, but also meet people within your community. Three things that I use quite often. One is the Procurement Foundry, which is in North America. They have, I think quarterly meetups for the Toronto chapter. It's a great place to meet other people in supply chain, as well as people you could discuss things such as negotiation with. LinkedIn, they have training modules, as well as a great place to meet and network people, to find and even research people for your negotiation piece. And finally, you have Supply Chain Canada, great resource. I would urge you to join while you're a student, because it's only $29. Once you're out in the working world, they want you to pay a little bit more. But they have tons of meetups, webinars, conferences, and job postings, things like that. So as always, I emphasize the importance of networking and growing your network in order to get the best out of your career. And that's it for me. So thank you very much for your time. It's always a pleasure. I think I got a list of questions here that you guys provided, so I'll start going through those. If there's any other questions about this or anything else, please don't hesitate to jump in.
Yeah, so maybe can you raise your hand also if you have questions to Trace? Yep. And so we can go order by order. And thank you so much, Trace. It's really interesting. And then we see that we often use the CMA form in class, and now we have another framework. And it's quite interesting for students to practice. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great one too. That's a good format to use. This one is a bit more involved and is typically for larger scale negotiations. But even for a smaller individual one, you can just cut some things and just focus on some of the main points. Looking at the questions here, first question I have is, since the COVID-19 pandemic started, the global supply chain is facing big challenges, like the high rise of the freight and shortage of space. Considering we cannot predict how long the pandemic will last, since we cannot predict how long the pandemic will last, I want to know the strategy that your company take to deal with it. It's always a challenge, especially for bringing things in. The strategy that we took, I would say, is twofold. One is to come up with what we call as secondary and tertiary suppliers. So rather than having what's called a single source supplier, we went to multiple suppliers or tiered suppliers, where we get the majority of our stock from one supplier, but we also have backup. So in case one couldn't get it, we have something to deal with. Also, what I found is we're focusing a lot more on the relationship. So if there's a limited amount of material to provide a customer, usually the company will give that to the customer that they have the best relationship with. So it's always good to focus on managing relationships, as well as setting up multiple suppliers. Okay. What are your suggestions to students who are going to graduate soon? Network, and network some more. You cannot network enough. You should be spending probably any waking moment you have on those three sites I gave you: Procurement Foundry, LinkedIn, and Supply Chain Canada, meeting people, finding out what's going on in the industry, keeping yourself up to date. These will not only help you find a job, but if you already have a job, they'll help you in an interview for the job. So always, and it's something that you don't stop when you get a job. You need to continuously use your network, constantly talk to your network, and continuously grow your network, because that's what you lean on to stay current in the industry, find people in different companies, and it'll even help you find a job one day. Okay. Can big data analytics make business negotiations easier? Yes, absolutely, and they have. In my previous role, I built out the data analytics program. And I found what it allows us to do is to get real-time information during a negotiation. In one scenario, I had a negotiator, a company we're negotiating with, saying, why should I give you this much of a discount? When you only buy X amount of dollars of product from us per year. I was instantly able to go into our system, pull out the data, and indicate, hey, you know what? you're actually not, we're not buying, we're actually buying significantly more from you than you stated. So, your facts are wrong. Also, what big data allows us to do that's happening now is there's actually negotiation simulators that you can actually use and simulate how a negotiation will go. This is obviously much more challenging because, there's still a pretty large disconnect in terms of how humans and technology react to different situations, because humans are typically very illogical and much more emotional. But yeah, absolutely, big data analytics is key, and it'll continue to be key in negotiations as well as other aspects of supply chain. What are tips on how an accomplished management professional can make your way to the top? I would say plan, execute, and network again. So anything that I've done in my career or where I've gotten to has not been by accident. It has been through rigorous planning and execution. I set out targets. I have vision boards. I say where I want to be in 1, 3, 5, 7 years. And I actually take actions to get to there. And I network rigorously and often in order to help me achieve what I want to achieve. Regardless of what you may see in movies and things like that, nothing happens by accident. Always spend as much time as possible planning and executing your career. Okay. Where do you see current business environment and future jobs, business related, as the world keeps changing in response to the pandemic? What business related fields do you see more growth and opportunities for new graduates? So as always, technology is always a huge area. Technology, supply chain technology, it's a huge area that's constantly growing. Big data analytics. Any areas that I would see shrinking would be areas that can be easily automated. And unfortunately, seeing certain roles, especially the pandemic, has accentuated this. Things such as doctors, lawyers, things like that are being quickly obsoleted by technology. Not completely, but to a certain degree. So I would say stay very close to the technology piece and always be aware of how to automate things. This will be things that'll keep you. These are things that'll keep you at the top of your career and at the top of your game, and always have opportunities available to you. Where do you see the business environment going for current job? Oh, sorry, I just did that one. Sorry. What does this say? Regarding managing relationships of the employee. I'm not sure what the question is there. Will international relationship management help us in work-life job activity? Absolutely. International relationship management is key. It's also very important in negotiations. As we become a more global organization, negotiations are spreading further and further out, and you need to be very aware of cultural differences in a negotiation. Each country or businesses that are set in different countries have very different cultural norms for interacting. An example would be if you ever do a negotiation or business in Germany, they're very much to the point. They want to come in, negotiate, come to an agreement, and then after we can enjoy, party, celebrate, whichever. While working with people in Japan, for example, they're very much people-oriented. They want to get to know the person before they get to the negotiation piece. They have to trust you. So the negotiation may start 2 or 3 days before. Having lunches and dinners with certain members and gaining their trust. Doing negotiations with people in India. Again, they really want to get to know the person, and they really want to take their time in a negotiation to ensure they're very sure with what they're doing. So you need to be aware of how to manage these relationships, and any international experience would be very, very beneficial. What is the hardest thing to do in the beginning of your journey for your new job position? I would say the hardest part for me is putting in the time. I'm someone who's very driven and wants change to happen right away, but you have to be aware that things take time. You constantly have to drive and apply pressure to grow your position, but sometimes things just have to run their course and take their time to do it. You can't just work in a position for 2-3 months and expect to get a raise or expect to get a promotion. Sometimes you have to put in a year, or you have to create two or three or four successful projects. So just don't sit around, but don't rush it. Some things just have to pay their course. Okay, so I think that's from these questions. Are there any other questions directly from the class? Any hands?
Yeah, Professor. Hello, Mr. Chris. I have a few questions about it. You were talking about networking and how important is networking and so on. But I have a personal questions, like, since you starting using negotiations, how long has changed you the negotiate, like learning how to negotiate? You will always learn. There is no stop. It's always something that you keep learning.
That's
but
correct.
Since you start using this type of negotiations, how much progress you have seen throughout your life and throughout your job, like comparing your old version of yourself?
Oh, significant progress. The more you realize that you should be negotiating in every aspect of your life, and you probably don't realize it, but you're constantly negotiating. If you've ever told your kid or a niece or nephew, eat your dinner first, get your dessert later, you've just negotiated. If you've ever had something with a partner or a spouse where you've said, oh, just let me watch the rest of this sports game, then I'll do the dishes, you've just negotiated. But all that happens is it becomes more and more complicated, and as it becomes more complex, you can't, as I said, just do these on the fly negotiations. You have to prepare for them, and the more you prepare, the better you get. And again, I like to use life to practice negotiations to see how people react. Like, sometimes, you could be in a store buying some clothes, and places that are firm like this is really good. I might find something that has a thread sticking out of it and say, hey, you know what, this thing's damaged. Can I get a discount on it? And they'll say, well, I can give you 5%. Oh, well, I was looking more like 25%, and then things like that. See how people react. Reaction is key to understanding it, but essentially you should be negotiating in all aspects of your life, and then really practicing it and really planning it when it comes to ones relating to your professional life. But yeah, I've seen significant improvement. Absolutely.
Thank you. And another question.
Okay.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. And Professor, I have another question as well. Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. And beside the negotiations also, do you think that, because I remember back in the time when I was studying that non-verbal language as well as always affect the type of negotiations. So do you think that in an environment like here in Canada, where there is a multicultural, different from different backgrounds, as allow you to interact and to help you in order to communicate even with people, as you say, from other countries as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, this goes back to the question that was asked about international relationship management. Cues can be very different from culture to culture. So when you're reading a cue, one cue may be let's say insulting to one party, but to that party it's just normal. It's just what it is. Sometimes certain cultures like to have a break after a certain amount of time, and when the break comes, it could be mid-conversation, they may just get up and leave, and that may be insulting to some party, but in other parties this is what it is. When it's time, it's time. So really understanding the international cultural differences, physical cues, nonverbal cues are extremely important. That's why I said sometimes when you have a group negotiation, you have someone whose core job is to note down the nonverbal cues from the other party. When you say, I want to pay, $25 per widget, and the other person's like, that should be noted down. this person made a face like, wow, that looks like it's way too low or too high or whatever it is. You know what I mean? So absolutely, nonverbal cues and cross-cultural nonverbal cues, very important to learn. This is why often enough, if you're part of a negotiation team, you'll start off as an observer before you become an actual negotiator.
Amazing. Thank you, Professor. Again.
Yeah, just Chris. I'm not a professor.
I'm sorry.
Hi, Chris. So obviously, you've been in multiple negotiation tables, but is there anyone that you think you like that was very difficult for you that you'd like to share with us?
Very difficult. Yes. In certain areas, in certain businesses, I would say probably mostly in IT software, you have organizations who set up relationships that make it almost impossible to negotiate. So an example would be organizations like SAP, Oracle. If your entire company is running off their system, so if you use an ERP from SAP or Oracle, and your entire company from supply chain to payroll to finance runs off this system, they know they have you. You have very little leverage when it comes to negotiation. So I was in a negotiation with one of our IT partners, and essentially we were looking for not even a price reduction, just a flat price for the next 3 years. And they wanted to do a 15% price increase. And essentially they were just, very hard on it. They essentially said, this is it, take it or leave it. And as I said, this is not a good stance to play, because it's all about relationship, but that's what they chose to. And this is actually surprising for such a large organization, but they did this. And at the end, what ended up happening is we ended up having to pay the 15% price increase because we had no choice. But then what did we do? We canceled all additional projects we had planned to do with them, which resulted in millions of lost revenue for them. So this is why the relationship is important. We took our business elsewhere. They're not the only one who can execute certain projects, and they should have known this. Maybe they didn't do their research on the other side, or they thought that we wouldn't cancel these projects or reroute them to other suppliers, but we did, and it was their loss. So this is why I said using the bulldozing method or using a very aggressive method doesn't always work well in business negotiations, right? You want to capture as much as value as possible, but you still have to keep the relationship in mind. So that'd probably be an example of a very difficult negotiation, because again, we couldn't create any value, we couldn't capture any additional value, but at the end of the day, they also lost value from their side. So that would be an example of us shrinking the pie, right? So that's something that I would say that's a lose-lose in a negotiation. Again, I don't like to use winning and losing, but that was a lose-lose outcome for that negotiation. So
that must have been a very difficult one. But
yeah,
you were saying before, do you think, because taking Oracle, do you think they saw the negotiation as in your company was just another client? Because rather than trying to keep a relationship, they would rather just get what they want?
Yeah, absolutely. And see, also when it comes in terms of companies, we were not their top or their highest revenue client. So as a result, they probably didn't deploy an execution, a negotiation team to do with us. If we were probably their top 50 clients, I would have been negotiating with probably an outside negotiation team. They would take the relationship very seriously. But for being a smaller customer of theirs, they just used internal employees to do the negotiation, and it is what it is. So yeah, unfortunate, but it is what it is.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem, Alvin. Any other questions? I can stay on for a couple more minutes. Yeah, go ahead, Ming.
Yeah. Hi, Chris. Thank you for your visiting. I'm Minting. So I just want to ask a small question. In the job position, I found there one is procurement and one is the sourcing. What's the difference? Do you know what's the difference between these two positions, and which one makes the negotiation much more?
Okay.
Thank you.
So So without kind of reading the job descriptions, I don't know the specifics, but essentially sourcing is a subsection of procurement. So when you look at procurement, it typically is broken up into a few sections. You have sourcing or strategic sourcing.
Okay.
You have supplier relationship management. You have data analytics, and you have contracting. So typically 4 areas. Contracting sometimes falls under supplier relationship management. Strategic sourcing is the piece which works essentially from contract negotiation or contract renewal to contract signing. That's the strategic sourcing part, or that's the sourcing piece. So depending on the size of the company, if it's a small company, you may have to do all functions under procurement. So you'll have to do sourcing, you'll have to do supplier relationship management, and you'll have to do the data analytics and contracting piece. In larger companies, these are sectioned off because it's just too much work for one individual person to handle. So I would say that in terms of that, probably the sourcing or the strategic sourcing piece would do the most negotiation.
Okay.
But again, procurement, much of it is around negotiation. So.
Okay. I see. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
Any other questions or any other comments? Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I have it on the, I think, second slide. Feel free to connect with me, and you can shoot me any questions you have through LinkedIn, and I'll be happy to respond to them.
Oh, got it. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much, Tracy, for coming and sharing with us. So,
my pleasure.
And as student, I am sure that we can learn so much from Trace, and I myself also. And on behalf of the chair and the coordinator, I would like to say thank you so much for your contribution. And I hope that you will come back also next time when you have time to share your knowledge with us, so that we will help the future generation grow.
Fantastic, absolutely. Always a pleasure to look at the upcoming class. And again, thank you very much, Professor Doan, for allowing me to take part. Very much appreciated.
Thank you so much, Teresa. All the best and happy holidays.
Same to everyone here. Thank you. Happy holidays, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
My pleasure.
Have a good day.
Thank you,
Bye, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too. So thank you.
Everyone, wait. You need to post. I see few of you didn't post your questions on the discussion board.
Me too, Professor. I didn't post them my questions. I just asked him right now.
Sure. So you need to post on the discussion board so that I can grade accordingly, because otherwise on the system they have no record. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, we'll do that.
Sure. So make sure that everyone you do that. Thank you so much for being here, and it's a very nice semester with you. So next week you have the quiz, and then I also launch a bonus quiz for you. Okay. Okay.
Professor, we would like to talk to you, me and Alvin and Eric, if possible.
Okay, sure. So we can have a few minutes here. So if you want to talk, and so the other, if you have any other questions, let me know. I will stop.